Alrighty, well, I'll try to keep things pretty brief from one thing to another, but I'm gonna just highlight over the 5 steps to goal success framework. Even though if you've done it before, you've heard it a number of times, I wanna touch on the highlights of that. I want to talk on the why behind the performance tests. We'll talk like fitness performance. We'll talk a little nutrition. And then we will also finish with like giving you some insight into the workout programming over the next 10 weeks and how you can like make the most of it in terms of your... the 5 steps to goal success little graphic, if you will, looks like this. And if you have done it before and watched the videos, or you have not done it before and watched the videos and you've kind of seen this. But as a real quick overview, the first one is building your big. This acronym just means your best you goal, and this is your why behind your health and fitness. You know, it's also your why for why this 10 weeks. Because all of us, our why behind our health and fitness is, you know, to feel better, have more energy, have more confidence, yada, 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 and all that stuff is great and should be why we prioritize our health and fitness. But it's like, why during April 20th to June 26th am I going to put maybe a little bit more effort and focus on this particular 10-week transformation or this particular season of my life? And everybody has different things going on. They're getting married here in a few weeks. Everybody has different things going on in their life as to why this season might be important for you. It could be maybe I am traveling a lot and I need something to like keep me engaged while I have all this travel. So you essentially want to identify what you're trying to avoid. What's the thing that you don't want to have happen? What are you trying to work towards, or who are you trying to become? And then who are you doing this for, or who do you have the ability to positively impact? When we identify what we want to avoid, like I want to avoid having to buy new clothes, or I want to avoid not having confidence when I go to the beach this summer or something like that. It gives you something to work away from. Like if a lion is chasing you, it gives you something to run away from. And then when you identify what you're working towards, maybe I'm going on a trip with a bunch of friends and I want to feel energetic and I want to not feel guilty about what I eat or drink on the trip, and that's what I'm working towards. That gives me something to look forward to and to have direction. And then when you identify who you're doing it for, you know, we're more likely to let ourselves down than we are to let somebody else down. And so if we know that prioritizing our health and fitness will give us more energy and confidence, and therefore will show up as a better father, spouse, mother to our kids or whatnot, then the fact that we know that they're relying on us can give us a little bit more resilience as we're going through. So that's why we build our big. So it's a few emotionally packed sentences that just kind of, we can refer to like, oh yeah, like I need to show up for this. I need to show up for this. I need to show up for this. So that's building your big. Step 2 is setting your success indicator. And for some of us, it's going to be more specific than others. Your success indicator is just like the specific target, objective, measurable thing that you're going for by the end of the 10 weeks. Obviously, something that's super easy is if you're going for weight loss or body fat loss or anything like that, or muscle gain, you can have that as your success indicator. It's basically, I'm starting here. I want to be here by the end of the 10 weeks. For a lot of us, it might just be, I want to improve on the performance tests. Or maybe it's like this one performance test is most important. I want to go from lifting this weight to lifting this weight by the end of the 10 weeks, or I want to get my quarter-mile run from this time down to this time, something like that. Other options could be something like there's blood work numbers that I want to move the needle on, or anything like that. Those are some different examples. And so is the objective that indicates that you are successful with the goal by the end of the 10 weeks. Progress indicators, if you do them, they will indicate to you that you're making progress on the overall goal. So success indicator is a lag measure, meaning you can't do anything about it once you see the number. So for example, like when you step on the scale, the number's gonna pop up and you can't do anything about it. All of the things that are going to impact that number have happened in the past. And so it helps it as a marker, but once you step on it, you can't do anything, it's too late. And so progress indicators are like, what are the habits and behaviors that we can do along the way where we know it's like, if I do this, I know the scale is going to take care of itself. Or if I lift heavy, I know the performance test is going to take care of itself and whatnot. So for progress indicators, for most of us, there's a fitness one, a nutrition one, and then some other one. Fitness would just be basically for most of us, the total number of workouts that we're going to complete this week and maybe what style of workout. So maybe it's like I'm going to go to a Best You workout 3 times and then I'm going to go on 1 jog, or I'm going to go to a Best You workout 3 times and I'm going to go to a Pilates class or something like that. So that might be one. Nutrition one, there can be a lot of different ways that you go about this. I guess like most detailed, most in-depth, most analytical way that you could go about it would be like calories and macros. I know a lot of us aren't going to do that. Most of us won't do that. Most people don't do that, but that would be one way. A very simple but helpful way that I have a lot of people do it is how many healthy meals are you going to eat per week out of a total of 21? Basically, if you have 3 meals a day times 7, that's 21 meals. And let's say you want to have 80% of the time where you eat a healthy meal, that's going to be 17 out of 21 would be your goal. A couple of other quick examples, maybe lunches and dinners are the biggest things that you want to focus on because breakfast, like you always are pretty good on. And so there's 14 total lunches and dinners throughout the week. And so maybe you focus on 10 out of 14 lunches and dinners are good. Maybe it's I want to have 5 homemade lunches every single week. Maybe it's I want to bring my lunch to work 4 days a week. Maybe it's I want to cook dinner at home 5 nights a week. Maybe it's I want to have 100 grams of protein and 30 grams of fiber 5 days a week. Those are some kind of examples that you can use. And then a few examples would be water intake, alcohol reduction, ideally, sweet intake, sleep, steps, things of that nature are potential other ones, but you can also be creative with that depending on things that you're working on. If you want to make it like a reading goal, you can make it a reading goal. If there's something at work that you want to like add into this to track it, you can add that. So that third one can be largely customizable for you. Next is your pills. Pills stands for the purpose is to increase the likelihood that you're successful. Because progress indicators, generally speaking, are relatively things that we kind of know or can come up with relatively easily, like I need to work out more, I need to eat healthy, yada, yada, yada. Pills are what can I do to increase the likelihood that I get this done? These are what I want to get done every single week. These do not change. Pills are how am I going to get that done? How am I going to set myself up for success to execute on my workouts? Do I need to go to bed earlier? Do I need to meal prep? Do I need to identify the 2 or 3 meals that I'm going to eat this week? Do I need to make a grocery list? Yada, yada, yada. If you have a step goal, do I need to block off my calendar 3 days a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday during 30 minutes at lunch so I can actually go get my walks in? Pills can stay the same from week to week, but they also can and should at various times change from week to week, because sometimes a pill like I want to go to bed by 10 p.m. on nights before I work out, that's probably going to stay the same mostly from week to week. I want to grocery shop on Sundays, might stay the same mostly from week to week. But if you're traveling, if you go to the lake during this time, the beach or whatnot, it's like those things are going to change because your circumstances are changing. Maybe it's like right when I get to the beach that I'm going to go to the grocery store and pick up food for the week or pick up food for lunches for the week, stuff like that. And so this becomes, for a lot of people, something that they just kind of copy and paste from week to week. Like, these are my pills last week, so I'm gonna do the same thing next week, without really thinking too much about how this week is different than last week. And so prioritizing the time to sit down and really think about what can I get done this week. One thing that David said was really actually thinking about what I can realistically get done. Because most of us, oftentimes when we're planning out what we want to get done this week, we kind of just do it in a vacuum, meaning I just know I want to get this done, and I'm going to say I'm going to get it done, but I'm not even going to look at the other demands of my life right now. And then you go and look at your schedule and you're like, shit, my kids have a game here, they have a game here, I got to go drop them off here and hit there, and oh wait, I actually have to, this lunch that's down in Franklin, and I have to drive 30 minutes down there to it, and you forget about all this stuff. And so when you're planning your pills, you really want to try to get into the nitty gritty of your week, because it feels kind of like a waste of time in the moment, but it'll save you so much time and frustration if you actually do your due diligence. So that's that. And then lastly, this one is the scoreboard. That's pretty good. This one is setting up your scoreboard. Setting up your scoreboard because this is one of the things that a lot of people have different relationships with the scoreboard. Some people like tracking things, and I know it's part of my personality a little bit more to track things. And if it's not part of your personality, I'm somewhat sorry. But at the same time, it's it will help you make progress. You just have to have the right relationship with it, and you have to set your goals appropriately. You know, like Danielle said, and David and a few other people, it's like if you set the target too high, then of course you're setting yourself up for frustration when you go to update your scoreboard. That doesn't mean like, you know, set your goals all the way down here, but at the same time, you have to know that it is a goal, and a properly set goal should probably be achieved like 80 to 90% of the time. And so you shouldn't see necessarily all greens every single week and everything. If you did, that means like you might not have stretched yourself enough. And so you need to learn to like give yourself a little bit of grace if you fall short of it. And I think that's just one of a few different like mindsets that will help you have a little bit of a better relationship with the scoreboard. And last thing I'll say, and I mentioned this to some people last week, one other reason why we don't like a scoreboard is, yes, it tells us when we're winning, but it also tells us when we're losing. And it sucks to be losing in a game. But if your kids are losing in their soccer game or basketball game, and they're like, oh, I want to give up, or like, I don't want to play next season. Most of the time it's like, come on. Like, it's okay to lose, it's okay to fail. And like, we tell them to that, but we forget to tell that to ourselves. And so we have to have the courage to step into the game and be okay with not executing or losing or not being on track, and be like, okay, how can I improve my game? Do I need to go practice dribbling with my left hand? Do I need to go out and shoot some soccer more often? Like, what does that look like in your life? Do I need to be more disciplined at getting to the grocery store? Do I need to meal prep a little bit better? And so those are just a couple of things to hopefully help a lot of our mindsets with the scoreboard. So that is that. Anybody have specific questions on any of those things before we kind of move on? At the end, I will leave more time for discussion about like your specific goals. Like if you're like trying to struggle with what should my success indicator be, or what should some of my progress indicators be, or stuff like that, I'll leave time at the end. But just for the sake of time, I want to get through the bulk of the stuff first. But anybody have like, I guess like higher level questions on that stuff? No? Okay. Just real quickly, you know, the why behind the performance test, we have bench press, back squat, and deadlift. So those are 3 lifts that are 3 of like the 7 main movement patterns when it comes to life and fitness. Upper body push is a bench press. Upper body pull is another main movement pattern. The squat is a main lower body movement pattern. The hinge, which is a deadlift, is a main lower body movement pattern. So we're trying to test ourselves in all of the main movement patterns to have a well-rounded assessment of our fitness, if you will. And so we're hitting all our main muscle groups and all the main movement patterns. Also, when it comes to just like longevity in general, which is huge for a lot of us, and like bone density is a huge conversation, like the main way that we can maintain our bone density as we get older is by doing heavy lifts. And when you're using a modality like the barbell, you can actually go heavy enough in order to actually help preserve your bone density. Like people think, oh, I'm gonna work out to improve my bone density, and then they do like dumbbell bench press with like 10-pound dumbbells. It's not doing shit, sorry. You actually have to use heavy weight, like generally greater than maybe 70 to 80% of your 1 rep max to actually get something out of that. And those exercises will help do that. Like, you know, as much as we might want our arms to look good, bicep curls are great, but they're not really gonna do a ton for our bone density. It's when we're putting our entire system under load that actually affects our skeletal system rather than just like this little muscle right here that's actually gonna help benefit that. So that's kind of a little bit of a reason for those first 3, push-ups and pull-ups. Again, it's upper body push, upper body pull. I just think body weight exercises are great because you can do them a lot of places. We want to be able to control our body weight for the most part in a lot of different ways. And then the quarter-mile run and conditioning are just 2 really good proxies for your overall heart health and aerobic capacity. And so those are just kind of 2 things that I came up with. Quarter-mile run is something that's, you know, not too terribly long, but definitely long enough. Afterwards, I took like 10 minutes before I did the conditioning test. So anyways, those are just really good in terms of heart health and building your endurance and aerobic capacity. So that's kind of the main things there. All right, let's get into some fitness stuff. So when it comes to exercise, there's like 4 main adaptations that we're trying to get out of resistance training. The first one is strength. And strength, what the adaptation for strength is, like what's actually happening inside of your muscles is your muscle is getting the ability to produce more force. And force equals mass times acceleration. So mass, meaning like how heavy is the weight, and acceleration is like the speed at which you move that weight. And so if we're trying to get stronger, meaning we're trying to produce more force, that means we need to try to move a lot of weight quickly. So that means, generally speaking, to build strength, you want to use more like 80% or higher of your 1 rep max to really optimize for strength. And when I say like 80% or higher, that doesn't mean you're not necessarily going to get stronger if you're lifting 70%. But if you're like on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being like, this is really going to help me get stronger, 1 being this is not going to help me get stronger at all, I'm making up numbers here. But if I'm using 70% of my 1 rep max, maybe that's like helping me a 3 out of 5, where I'm using 90%, maybe that's helping me a 5 out of 5 or something like that. So 80% or higher. Usually if you're using 80% or higher, you're going to be in the rep range of like 1 to 5 reps. And you want to leave about 1 to 4 reps in reserve. This whole reps in reserve thing. So a lot of you guys know, have heard me talk about that a lot, but that's when I write on the whiteboard RIR. Reps in reserve means how many reps short of failure am I going to get to? So if somebody could put a gun to my head and I could get 10 reps, but that 10th rep was just barely getting it up, 2 reps in reserve would be stopping at 8. Meaning 8 was hard. I probably could have done 2 more. On certain exercises, we have a better grasp as to what that actually feels like. We have a better grasp of what that usually feels like on something like a bench press compared to a squat, because a squat can be a little bit like scarier to get all the way close to failure than something like a bench press when you have somebody just kind of like easily spotting you. And so we just want to make sure that a lot of these that we're finding the right rep range. So to go back to strength, we want to leave about 1 to 4 reps in reserve. And I want you to listen closely to why this is so important, because if you're going to 0 reps in reserve, let's say on the first working set, you go to fail. There's something that's called the stimulus to fatigue ratio, where if you go all the way to failure, you're building up a lot of fatigue in your system, therefore negatively impacting your future sets and your ability to perform on those future sets. And so when I say stimulus is how much that set is going to help impact the adaptation that we're looking for. And so if we stop at like 2 reps in reserve, and let's say a scale of 1 to 10, again, these are kind of like artificial numbers. Let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, 10, this is really gonna help me get stronger. 1, this is gonna not help me get stronger at all. 2 reps in reserve is probably gonna help us, let's say a 9. 1 rep in reserve might help us like 9.1. 0 reps in reserve might help us 9.15. So like the amount that it helps us is very small, but it builds up a lot more fatigue, therefore negatively impacting our future sets. And so that's why on those lifts, it usually looks something like we're gonna go 2 reps in reserve, then 1 rep in reserve, then 0 reps in reserve, so that we hit a good stimulus and we can change what's going on inside of our muscles and our body on all 3 sets. But the fatigue, instead of looking like after the first set, the fatigue builds way up and then we can't really do shit on the second and third sets, we just have a good stimulus on all 3, if you will. So that's reps in reserve. And for strength, we want to leave usually 1 to 4, sometimes going to 0 is okay. And the last thing I'll say to that in terms of reps in reserve is like there are certain exercises where that matters more than others. We all know that doing a 0 reps in reserve set of back squats going to like 5 reps, we finish that and we're going to be pretty cooked. If we're doing bicep curls and we do a set of 5 and that last rep was the last rep that we do, our arms are going to be burning, but it's not like we're going to be huffing and puffing all that much. And so the fatigue that is built up compared on a back squat to a bicep curl is very different. And so that's why on like the heavy lifts, we care more about not getting too close to failure on all the sets. Hopefully that makes sense. And then strength, we want to make sure we rest like 90 seconds to 2 to 2.5 minutes most of the time so that we can actually have good movement. And then I said force equals mass times acceleration. It's not like you're really, if you're doing like a 1 rep max on or like a set of 2 or 3 on the bench press, it's not like the barbell's gonna move that fast, but as long as the intent of moving fast is there, that's what we're looking for. Okay, so like when we're looking to build strength on those 3, trying to move fast with intent is important. Okay, that's strength. The other couple will be a little bit faster. Hypertrophy. Hypertrophy, the actual adaptation that is going on in terms of our muscles. A lot of people mess or think these are the same thing, but they're not. Hypertrophy is the muscle actually getting bigger. So it's the muscle fiber inside actually growing inside, whereas this is just the muscle fiber itself having more ability. Hypertrophy is the muscle fiber getting bigger. Now, sometimes those kind of will increase simultaneously, but if you're looking to optimize for one over another, then you do things differently. So like a power lifter is mostly going to do sets of 2 to 6, whereas a bodybuilder is mostly going to do sets of like 6 to 20 of their rep counts. And so hypertrophy, you usually do sets of about 5 to 20 or 6 to 20, usually around 60 to 80% of your 1 rep max, and usually maybe 0 to 3 reps in reserve. And that's why it's so important in terms of weight choice being appropriate and not just kind of like coasting through it. You know, having coached at Orange Theory for so long, one of the main reasons why sometimes you don't get the most bang for your buck out of it in terms of like building muscle is because there's the weight tree there, and you know, you see this exercise and you do a set of it and you're like, this is convenient, I'm just gonna, you know, pick these up, and it says to do 10, so I'm gonna do 10. When you finish a set of 10, like there's maybe a little bit of burn, but like you probably could have done 8 more reps of that. And it's like, you're really not gonna do anything in terms of helping your build muscle there, because if you could have done 8 more, that's 8 reps in reserve, so we're nowhere near enough close to failure to where you have the ability to build muscle. And then the second reason why it might be tough to build muscle in a setting like that is because you really need one of the 2 biggest things in terms of what's going to predict muscle growth is proximity to failure, like I just mentioned, and then total number of sets across a week. So the volume of sets that you're putting in. Oftentimes, if you go to a workout on yourself or you go to a class, you might do bicep curls for 2 sets of it. And you know, you get a little bit of a burn or whatnot, and oh man, my arms, hopefully I get toned from this. And then maybe like later on in the week, you do another 2 sets, but like that might be it. But really, in order to build muscle, the total number of working sets or hard sets for that muscle group over the course of a week needs to be like 10 to 20 sets. And so it's dependent on, you know, your fitness history and how much you've been doing up to that point. So like a beginner, they might get a lot of muscle growth by doing 10 sets or maybe even a little bit less. But the more that you do it, the more volume you usually have to apply to the muscle in order for it to adapt and grow bigger. And so again, let's just go back to the biceps, for example. If you want to grow your biceps, then you probably want to have 10, 15, maybe more sets of that in order to really target that muscle group to grow. And so in, like, let's say our upper body day, we might have a day where we hit 3 sets of bicep curls or 4 sets of bicep curls. And so if that's the only thing that you do that week on your biceps, probably not really going to grow. If you do more also in the full body day or on Friday's workout and you get up to those higher sets, then like you might have the ability to grow that muscle group. And so lower sets can obviously maintain where you're at just fine. It actually takes a lot less to maintain than you think, and so that's why it's so important to just like show up a lot of days just to kind of maintain rather than have to try to make up a deficit. So anyways, in terms of building muscle, the 2 most important, or a couple of most important things are proximity to failure and total number of sets over the course of a week, which is why Friday is a flex day, so that if you care more about the look of your legs, you can do legs. If you care more about the look of your arms and abs, you can do more arms and abs. Or if you're just like looking to improve your cardiovascular system more, then you can do that. So that's hypertrophy. Yes, sir.
When you build your workouts during the week, like the
Yeah, so on a lower body day, I factor in a lot of different things. I basically always want to get in a big bilateral movement, meaning both legs moving at the same time. So like a squat, some version of a squat, some version of a deadlift. I like to try to get at least 1 or 2 unilateral movement patterns, and so that could be a single leg RDL, and I also usually like to try to get multiple planes of motion if we can, and so not just forward or backward, but maybe lateral. We try to hit all of the major muscle groups, so try to hit quads, hamstrings, and glutes in some way, shape, or form. So like a squat or a lunge or a step up is really good for quads. Reverse lunge, a Bulgarian split squat, a hip bridge are really good for glutes. A hamstring curl and RDL are really good for hamstrings. And so usually I am trying to get in probably, depending on the muscle group, probably 3 to 8 sets of those main muscle groups. Usually it's going to be a little bit more focus on quads and glutes because it's very practically easy to execute and coach squats, lunges, step ups, yada, yada, et cetera, and because of the equipment that we have available. So anyways, long story short, with any of the upper body or lower body days, we're probably going to get in 3 to 8 sets per muscle group. And so doing an extra day of hitting that muscle group will get you to 10 or maybe more is the thought process. Good question. Okay. Lastly, or I guess kind of second to lastly, endurance. Muscular endurance is the ability for the muscle to keep pushing further than it can go in the past. And it's basically like your muscle trying to flush out. I wouldn't be able to know the exact scientific terms, but it's your muscle's ability to like flush out. I forget exactly what it's flushing out. It's not necessarily lactic acid, but you're like trying to flush waste product out of your muscle more effectively and efficiently as you keep going. Is kind of muscular endurance. And that's where you use a little bit lighter weight, less than maybe 70% of your 1 rep max, 15 or more reps. You usually want to get 0 to 2 reps in reserve, so pretty close to failure, and then you're usually resting a minute or less. And then lastly, power. Power is one of those things where when we get older, we think like I'm scared to do jumping type exercises, but we all know that as we get older, I forget the exact percentages, so I'm gonna somewhat make them up, but they're close enough, but I don't have them right in front of me. But we lose muscle at like 2 to 3% per year after 40. We use strength at like 3 to 5% per year after 40. We use power at like 5 to 10%. Those aren't the exact numbers, but it's muscle, then we lose even more strength and we lose even more power. And the reason why strength and power diminish faster is because what are responsible for strength and power are your type 2 muscle fibers. There's basically, not to get too much into it, but there's type 1 muscle fibers that are responsible for doing a lot of activity, but not usually that heavy of weight or that intensive movement. And then there's type 2 muscle fibers that are responsible for heavy weight and explosive movement. And as we get older, when the type 2 muscle fibers are not used, those diminish very quickly. And so that's why doing things like jumping or any kind of explosive movement or heavy weight is really important to do to maintain those type 2 muscle fibers. And usually power is you're using light weights but moving quickly with intent. So the best example is if we're holding like very light dumbbells and doing dumbbell jumps, where we're holding weights in our hand, like maybe 10 pounds, and we're going, and we're trying to be super explosive, but the intent of the movement, if you're just going like you're not doing crap in terms of building your power. The intent of the movement is really important. And you're not usually getting very close to failure either. So there are times when I might program, we're doing dumbbell jumps for 3 reps, and we're doing box jumps for 2 reps. It's like, and then you're gonna rest for a minute afterwards. You know, you're gonna finish the 3 and 2 and you'll be like, I'm ready to go again. But in order to bring maximum intent, you need to give your body actual rest. And so power is not about keeping your heart rate elevated or anything like that. So that's power. All right. Questions on training, and we're going to go into nutrition.
That was good.
Thanks.
Back to review from all those years ago.
You sound like the Huberman podcast.
It's like good because there is a quiz
Alrighty. Nutrition. Let's dive into this. So, I'm going to touch on this framework that some of you guys have heard me talk about before, but I think it's one of the most effective ways to frame it up. Let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so I took a nutrition certification course a long time ago, or a couple years ago, that taught this framework called the Fat Loss Forever Pyramid. Now, it's very effective to understand, even if your goal isn't fat loss. And the reason why I'm going through this isn't because everybody's goal is fat loss. And I know not everybody's goal is fat loss, but learning about this is really about learning how metabolism works and the order of importance of operations. So the bottom most important thing in terms of like your nutrition approach, it's hard to spell when you're talking, that's right, sustainability and adherence. So basically, this is kind of like if your goal is fat loss, these are the steps that you need to hit. These are the prerequisites. Like this is step number 1. If you don't hit this, nothing else matters, because it doesn't matter how scientific or appropriate your nutrition plan is. If it's not sustainable or you can't adhere to it consistently, then it's not going to matter. So that's step number 1. You need to make sure that what you're doing is sustainable. The second step is calories. Now, I know all of us have maybe different relationship with calories. I think that one thing about calories is, oftentimes with things, we are fearful of things we don't understand. A lot of us are fearful of AI because we've never used it before. We have no idea how it works. But maybe the more that you understand it, the less scary it might be. The same thing with finances. If we don't know how to manage our personal finances, then opening up our bank account and seeing investments and all that kind of stuff is what's going on? But if the more you understand it, the less it might scare you. And so hopefully this conversation about calories can kind of do the same type of thing. And so just the idea is that if your goal is fat loss, then a calorie deficit is the second thing that is most important in terms of hitting your goal. It needs to be sustainable, and then you have to be in a caloric deficit. The third one, and this isn't obviously a pyramid that I came up with. It's a nutrition scientist guy named Eric Helms, but he came up with this. Third one is exercise. I think it's something like for people who successfully lose body fat, it's like a large percentage of them that don't put it back on, they exercise. If you don't exercise, the likelihood of putting it back on is far higher. And so that's one of the main reasons why exercise is so important. And I really think that it's more of an identity type thing. If you see yourself as somebody who exercises, you see yourself as somebody who does healthy habits in other areas of life as well, therefore helping keep the fat off if you have lost it, if you will. Next one is actually self-monitoring. So the importance of tracking something. I know a lot of you guys love to hear that. Next one is protein and fiber, which we'll talk a little bit more about. So hitting your protein and fiber goals is the next thing that is most important. In order to achieve that, we need something that's sustainable. We need to make sure we're in a calorie deficit. If we're doing this and we're hitting these numbers, but we're not in a calorie deficit, we're not going to be losing the fat that we want to lose. Then it's carbs and fats, hitting that target, and then it's supplements, which we're not really going to talk about today. So let's dive into some of the more specifics here. Damn, I just drew that all out. See ya. I know. I had to take Kennedy's car because as big and robust as my Kia Soul is, it didn't fit in there. So I had to take Kennedy's car. Anyways, so again, when it comes to this conversation, this is not, like, I still probably think if there's 34, maybe like 1, 2, or 3 people will count calories and do macros. And so I'm not saying you guys need to, but I want to give you the education of it just so you have some sort of understanding. Because I actually have counted calories and macros for like a 10-week period of my life one time, and that was it. And I'm like, I don't really want to put the extra work in to count this stuff. But knowing it is very helpful. So the 3 primary macronutrients are protein, carbs, and fats. 1 gram of each of them for protein and carbs is 4 calories. For fat, it's 9 calories per gram. That doesn't make fat bad, it just makes it more calorically dense. So for example, like the other day, I made that post of somebody asking, are nuts healthy? And I was like, yes, they're healthy, but they are higher fat content, therefore they're more calorically dense, and therefore you just usually want to limit how much you might add on a salad or your Greek yogurt bowl or whatnot. So that's that. So for example, if somebody had a meal that was 25 grams of protein, 50 grams of carbs, and 20 grams of fat, which might be, a relatively typical, maybe like small meal, it's 480 calories. That's how going up, getting your total calories in a meal works. God bless you. So that is basically one side of the equation. If your goal, again, is fat loss, or even if your goal isn't fat loss, there's one side of the equation of calories in. The other side of the equation is calories out. How many calories you're burning on a daily basis. That gets represented by something that's called TDEE, which is total daily energy expenditure, how many calories you're burning on a daily basis. And there's basically 4 primary things that make that up. There's your BMR, which is your basal metabolic rate. There's your NEAT, which is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. There's your TEF, which is your thermic effective food. And this is your EAT, your exercise activity thermogenesis. So your BMR is how many calories you're burning at rest. Your non-exercise activity thermogenesis is how you burn calories as you live throughout your day. That's everything basically besides exercise. Some people can not consider walking in here. I consider usually walking in here. It doesn't really matter. It's all under the same bucket. But it would be like standing up burns a little bit more calories than sitting down. Someone who talks like with their hands, like I do a little bit more, burns a little bit more calories than somebody who just stood there and talked like this. So NEAT is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Thermic effective food is, when you eat a piece of food, your body has to put in work to break it down, digest it, and absorb it. And so when you're breaking it down, your body is actually burning calories while it's doing that. So that's thermic effective food. And exercise activity thermogenesis is just how many calories you burn while you're exercising. Now, that's the total number. Your BMR, how many calories you burn at rest, accounts for about 60% of the total number of calories that you burn on a daily basis. Your non-exercise activity thermogenesis accounts for about 25. Thermic effective food is about 10 to 15. And then exercise is about 0 to 10. If you don't work out at all, obviously it's 0. This is why it's so important to understand that excessive exercise is not going to be your best friend and when it comes to losing body fat. Obviously you want to work out, but it's it can only account for up to 10% is the point. You're only going to do so much from it. And if it's 10%, you're usually a marathon runner where you're running for a couple of hours multiple times throughout the week, which is none of us. And so excessive exercise is not going to be the route. So the calories out side of the equation can definitely be changed a little bit, but calories in is where you have more control to change. BMR, basal metabolic rate, it's if you have more muscle, you will burn a little bit more calories. If you get good sleep, you're going to be burning a little bit more calories. The less stress you're under, you're gonna be burning a little bit more calories. Anytime we have any sort of stressor on our body, on our system, our body's gonna be like, hang on to energy because you're gonna need it later. And so any time of stressor is like not going to have you burn calories quite as effectively. Non-exercise activity, this is one of the ones that's probably most modifiable of them, where it's like if you're just sitting on your butt all day and you get in 2,000 steps, then it's like you got a lot of room to build in more NEAT in your day. And so this is one of the most modifiable. Thermic effective food is, I'll have the exact numbers here. Not that this makes a necessarily huge impact, but everything can matter a little bit. The thermic effective food for fats is about 2 to 3%. And I'll tell you what that means in a second. Carbs is about 6 to 8%. Protein and fiber is about 20 to 30%. So what that means is if I eat 100 calories of just protein, my body, if it's 20%, my body will burn 20 calories just trying to break the protein down, because protein to break down inside of your body takes more work and effort. And so you net 80 calories from that. So that's why, one of the reasons why utilizing protein as like focusing on that as a strategy for fat loss can help a little bit, because you're netting a little bit more a little bit fewer calories compared to the other macronutrients. That is that. Any questions on any of these things that I have up here? Yeah. Okay. Now, there was the calories in, calories out. It's a scale. If calories in is higher consistently than calories out, we'll probably be putting on some body weight. If calories out is higher than calories in, we're gonna be losing. If it's basically neutral, we'll be staying the same. And so that leads to the question of like how do we know how many calories that we're burning? Therefore, we can set a target for how much we should consume. And so let's do calories in versus TDEE, which is calories out. You know, there are calculators online where you can go in and essentially you put in kind of your body weight, your body fat percentage, your age, your weight, your activity level, your gender, and it will spit out to you what it approximates your total caloric expenditure to be on a daily basis. And again, that's basically saying, okay, we know if you weigh more, generally you're gonna burn more. If you have more muscle, you're gonna burn more. As you get older, you burn a little bit less. And if you're a male, you burn a little bit more than females. So those are like the things that it takes into account and gives you an estimation. But it is just that, it's an estimation. The true only way that you can truly determine how many calories you're burning on a daily basis is to track your calories basically every single day for 2 weeks in a row, and also step on the scale every single day for 2 weeks in a row and see what happens. So if you ate, let's say, an average of 2,000 calories for 2 weeks, and you weighed yourself and it stayed basically the exact same for 2 weeks, you would know, okay, I ate 2,000 calories, I'm burning 2,000 calories, so my TDEE is about 2,000 calories. Then it's like, okay, my goal is to lose body fat. Now what do I do? That's where, let's just use that number of 2,000 as the baseline. Calories in, usually you wanna go to somewhere between like a 300 to 600 calorie deficit in order to reliably see the fat loss that you wanna see. And so let's say maybe on the more conservative side of that, let's say you start eating 1,700 calories. What this is, let's say this is your TDEE. Something like that. All right, so where's my answer? All right, so let's say my TDE, which is made up of these four things, is 2,000. if I eat like, this is kind of the range of, this is simulating the range of your TDEE. It's like if I eat 1,850 calories, so I'm at a 150 calorie deficit, it's probably not really enough to see progress. So like, let's say that's like 1850 is still in here. And so because it's still kind of in this range, you're not gonna see progress. And let's say the same thing, 150 caloric surplus, you're probably not gonna gain any weight because it's just a little bit above. And so it's not really gonna do much. But then once we get like eating the 1700, we're outside of it. And so we truly are in a caloric deficit. If we do that consistently, then the idea is that we see body fat loss. And the proper expectation of the rate of fat loss is somewhere between 0.5 pound to 2 pounds on average per week. 2 pounds is still pretty high up there. It's basically based on how much body fat you have to lose and what size of a caloric deficit that you're in. If you have more body fat to lose, you have the ability to lose it faster. If you're in a bigger caloric deficit, you have the ability to lose it faster than if you're in a little bit smaller caloric deficit. But one of the things that I think is most valuable for us to know, and I put this in one of my long emails a couple weeks ago or something like that, is there's something that happens inside of our body called metabolic adaptation, meaning our metabolism adapts. I know it's crazy. Your metabolism adapts. And so our body doesn't like being in a calorie deficit. Our body sees that as a threat, and it's like, hey, I'm used to getting 2,000 calories from you. Now I'm only getting 1,700. What the hell? Now I need to learn how to live on 1,700 calories rather than 2,000. And so there's no specific amount of time where this happens from one individual to the next, but if you're eating 1,700 and burning 2,000, that's gonna happen for a little bit. And that's when you're gonna see progress with your fat loss. But then you're gonna get to a point over time where, it could be 6, 10, 12, 16 weeks down the road where your body is like, I'm sick of burning 2,000 calories. I'm sick of being in a calorie deficit. I've learned now how to burn 1,700 calories in a day. Now I'm eating 1,700, but also burning 1,700, and my weight is now back at calorie neutral. And so I'm not seeing weight loss anymore. Then it's like, okay, what if I want to continue to see more weight loss? Well, you can push the calories down a little bit further and you can start eating a little bit less. And so then you can start eating the 1,400. And that is when you would start to see a little bit more progress after that. But then the same thing would happen over a certain period of time down the road. Your body would adapt, and now you would be eating 1,400 and now only burning 1,400. And that's when you again see a plateau where you're not losing it anymore. And so then it's like, okay, what do? Do you drive calories down even further? That's already pretty darn low in terms of calorie consumption and food consumption. And so driving it down lower would continue to see progress, but then you're driving your metabolism even down further to where because one of the big problems is people get to let's say this point, then they see a plateau and then they're kind of like, screw it. And they start eating 2,000 calories again. And then what happens is your body can only burn this and you're consuming this. So now you're in a pretty large caloric surplus, and so you're gonna be putting the weight back on because you've kind of driven your metabolism down. And so really the proper kind of way to go about it is once you get down to here, let's say, and you're either happy with it or you wanna resume weight loss in the future, but you don't wanna eat less, we need to gradually work this number back up. So I'm eating 1,400 and burning 1,400. Next week I need to eat 1,500. Because again, if I'm still kind of in this range, eating in a little caloric surplus is not going to put body fat back on me. And then maybe I do that for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, now I'm eating 1,500 and burning 1,500. Next time I'm gonna go up to 1,600. And same thing, I'm not in too big of a caloric surplus, but enough to get my system back going again. And so the idea is that you build your metabolism back up to where it's used to burning more, but you do so slowly and intentionally in order to kind of restore your metabolism, if you will. So my main reason why I like educating people on this is we often think I'm just gonna eat less and all my problems are gonna be solved because I'm gonna lose the weight that I wanna lose and then I'm good. But what happens is people eat a lot less And then they'll either have to eat a lot less for the rest of their life to not put anything back on, or they're going to put it right back on. And so it's important not to just dramatically drop into a huge caloric deficit in order to make sure you don't just destroy your metabolism and how many calories that it can burn.
Can you build muscle in a caloric deficit?
Yes, people can lose fat and build muscle at the same time. It's harder the more advanced in your fitness journey you get, but yes, you can. When it comes to the target of your calorie deficit, the kind of like scientific number that's out there is the goal is to achieve a 3,500 caloric deficit per week in order to see 1 pound of weight loss per week. So that's why traditionally some people put you in a 500 calorie deficit 7 days of the week to get you to that 3,500. That scientifically would say that if we do that consistently, we're going to lose about a 1 pound per week. So traditionally, like those numbers of like 2,000 calories in, or 2,000 is the calories that you burn, 1,500 calories in would be like a very standard thing that you might see people would execute on. This is hard to do. The most important thing is this over the course of a week. So if we just like numbers to be even over the course of the week, we can execute it that way. Or we can go 700 calories over the course of 5 days, giving us that 3,500, and then we're neutral the other 2 days. That could be one way to do it, because maybe I want to attack it a little bit more on the week and then not think about it as much on the weekends. But what happens to most of us, or a lot of us, is we do something like 500 during the week and we're doing really good, and we're at 2,500, but then let's say we're burning 2,000 calories per day, then we eat 2,500 on Saturday, 2,500 on Sunday, so that's 1,000 surplus. So now that our deficit is just 1,500, and we see that we lose 0.2 pounds, and we're frustrated and think, what the hell, I had a good week and I just went over a little bit on the weekend. Well, sorry, it's not that easy. And so over the course of the week is the most important thing. How you get that from a day-to-day basis is, customizable to how you want to approach it. Questions on that? No. Just because it's so prevalent in our society today, when it comes to like GLP-1s, I'm not the expert on that, like on what it does or side effects or anything like that. But from all of the things that I have learned about it, it seems where basically what it does is it makes it so your brain, it messes with the hunger hormones in your brain and just makes it so you are less hungry as you go throughout the day. And so the only thing it's doing is getting you to eat less. There's nothing else inherently that it does inside of your body that makes it so you magically lose fat. It just makes you eat less, is what most people like scientifically say that it does. And so it just helps you get into that calorie deficit. You think about food less, you're less hungry, and so might naturally help you get into that caloric deficit without having to like fight off the hunger or grab a glass of water rather than fall into the if you're a GLP-1, you don't think about food, then it's like, oh, I'm good. Where if you're not on it and like, oh, maybe I'm a little hungry, and you grab a glass of water to curb that or whatnot. My worry for some people on it is like they eat so much less, and then they bring their calories into very low. then their metabolism gets so slow, and then, maybe they stay on it the rest of their life and they just always don't eat, which I love food, so that would suck for me. Or they get off of it and they haven't necessarily built in the habits and routines to do this on their own, to maintain this calorie deficit on their own, or they haven't really learned how to slowly build their metabolism back up. And therefore, if they're off of it and then just kind of go back to what they had been eating, then they're just going to put it right back on. So I guess that was all I kind of wanted to say about that. If there's no shade on anybody if you are doing it whatsoever, from my point of view, I've had people like come up to me and be like, I've been nervous to tell you, but this is what's going on. I'm like, I'm fine. I'm fine with that. So anyways, I would like to know if you are, I'm not asking right now, just because I think it will help me, one, understand your goals, and then the other thing is like when you're in a caloric deficit and you're eating less, you are going to be a little bit less fueled to perform optimally, maybe in a workout. And so like, if you're in a workout and you're really tired on one of the days, and I know that, I might be less like, come on, let's go. I might be like more just like, okay, I know kind of what's going on maybe. So that's that. Wanted to touch on that. Really quickly, to stay on this, hopefully just one more last thing. So if you are you're burning that, you want to eat 1,500 calories. What's the makeup of those 1,500 calories in terms of your macros, in terms of your protein, your carbs, and your fats? Well, usually we start off by identifying what your protein goal is. And so protein goal might be anywhere between 0.7 grams to 1 gram per pound of your ideal body weight. For somebody eating 1,500 calories, that's going to be, someone that's, maybe a little bit smaller. So let's say their person is 140 pounds. Let's say their ideal body weight is, I might make the math a little bit harder on myself. Does anybody have their calculator on them? 135 times 0.7. It's like 100 something. Huh? 94.5, so 95. Okay, so 95 grams of protein would be that macro. 95 times 4 is 360, 380. So, thank you. So that means, okay, I'm going to consume 95 grams of protein, and therefore that's 380 calories because 1 gram of protein equals 4 calories. So that times 4 is 380. Then after that, we determine carbs and fats. And so, okay, we know we're going to eat 1,500. We know that 380 of that is from protein. So we know that I have 1,120 calories left for my carbs and my fats. That's where how you break up your consumption between carbs and fats does not matter as long as it's this number. You can eat all from carbs and very little from fat, or vice versa. That's where it's like if you're keto, you would do higher in fat and lower in carbs, or traditionally you'd be usually a little bit, people would more traditionally maybe be a little bit more in carbs and a little bit more in fat. And so let's say, I might need that calculator again. Let's say we want to go or I should just do 50%. Let's just go 50% for the sake of ease of math, although it's not that easy. 50% from carbs. Practically when I coach people with nutrition, I go about this whole process. Maybe a little bit more than you needed to know, but hopefully it's a little bit insightful. What's up?
Does it matter how much of the carbs is fiber?
No. No. Optimal fiber intake would be 25 to 35 grams or more per day. But, okay, that's it on the details of the nutrition. If it wasn't, was that helpful? Okay. I hope I didn't turn us into anyone psychomaniacal about calories or macros, but hopefully that provides a little bit of education there. Like I mentioned, most of us are probably not going to be going into that level of depth or detail when it comes to tracking. But like, for example, if you just set the goal of eating 95 grams of protein per day, and that was your nutrition goal, Usually, because protein is a little bit more filling, I might hit my carbs and fats goals regardless of whether I track it or not, because I'm a little bit more full and because I focused more on protein, and so maybe the carbs and fats are not excessive in portion size. And so that's kind of the idea, is if your goal is fat loss, we're trying to set some sort of weekly nutritional target that will help us achieve this without having to track all of this. Could be tracking protein. It could be, I know that I eat 17 out of 21 healthy meals. And for a lot of us, if we just eat 17 out of 21 healthy meals, then we're gonna maybe get into a 400 calorie deficit every single day for 7 days in a row, and then we'll see progress. And so all of the nutritional goals that we set, if the goal is fat loss, are just kind of like ways to get there without having to do all the work of counting and tracking and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that was that. Okay, the last kind of main topic I wanted to mention is some workout programming insights and tips and whatnot. So all of you guys know that we obviously will hit the squats, deadlifts, and bench press on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're basically, as always, earlier on in the 10-week transformation, we start at a little bit lower percentage of our 1 rep max, and then we work up in our percentage of our 1 rep max as we go from week to week. But we want to make sure, like especially on squats, that we prioritize range of motion early on, and we get all the way down there so that the legs are at 90 degrees at the bottom. For bench press, obviously, we want to get all the way down so the barbell hits our body at the bottom. So we'll continue to have kind of those progressions as we go throughout the week. Not much is too different on those compared to in the past, so I'm not going to get that much into it. On Monday's workouts, we have done this in the past, and I'm going to bring it back. On Monday's workouts, after we all warm up, we're going to have like a 10-minute window where you can choose one of the performance tests that you want to focus on. And that'll be kind of your first station for the first 10 minutes. Now, the options are basically at calisthenics, the smaller gym. You can either choose squats or bench press. You can choose push-ups and pull-ups because it's a 10-minute period, and so we're gonna do both of them rather than just one. You can choose push-ups and pull-ups. You'll be doing 3 sets of one of them and 2 sets of the other. Or you can choose the quarter-mile run. And there were specific intervals that you'll follow for the quarter-mile run. The way that we're going to recommend people choose is either choose 2 or 3 of them over the course of the 10 weeks. Maybe you choose 2 of them over the course of the 10 weeks, and I'm going to do one for 5 weeks in a row, and I'm going to do another for 5 weeks in a row. That's probably how I would recommend most people do it. Or you can choose 3. And you do one for like 3 weeks, another for 3 weeks, and one for 4 weeks, or something like that. It's just kind of like, what do you care to improve on the most? Now, if you come to every single Monday, then you'll be able to, if you don't come to every single Monday, then, and you come to some, then you can hit it sometimes. If you don't come to Mondays at all, then you don't have to worry about it. But just to give you that insight, if you want to start thinking about what you want to choose, that will happen on Mondays. This is the part you're really, really going to be jacked up and psyched up and really, really excited about. On lower body days, when I split you guys up and half of the crew goes and lifts and the other half of the crew usually does stations, the station half is going to start off with kind of their own little lift, which will be Bulgarian split squats. But before you freak out and throw stuff at me, you're only doing it 5 times over the course of the 10 weeks. And so it's not going to be too bad. But we're going to follow like a specific progression for the split squats as well, because it can be such a good exercise for muscle growth and getting single leg strength, and that will transfer over to also double leg strength as well. But for example, like in week 1 and 2, you won't do it both weeks, but week 1 and 2, you'll do 4 sets of 8 on each leg. The next weeks 3 and 4, we'll do 4 sets of 10 with the same weight. Weeks 5 and 6, we're going to bump up the weight and go 4 sets of 6. The next 2 weeks, we're going to go 4 sets of 8 with the same weight. And then the last time, you'll go bump up the weight again and do 4 sets of 6 to 8. Now, good thing about this is you will have a lot of, a decent amount of rest time. So for example, the 4 sets of 8, you're gonna have a 2.5 minute window to get 8 on one leg, 8 on the other, and then rest for the remainder of the 2.5 minutes until you go again. I've done a lot of Bulgarian split squat focus and progression myself over these last 10, 12 weeks. And when you do them with the right weight and really challenge yourself, as most of you guys know, they kick the hell out of you. And so you really need that, that rest. Now, Bulgarian split squats for all of us, we have different levels of proficiency with them. And so like depending where we're at, if we need to do it on, if we're not popping up that back leg and we're going split squats on the ground, we're gonna start with split squats on the ground. If we need some assistance with pulls, we're gonna do some assistance with pulls. And so everybody, how they do that is gonna be maybe a little bit different, but that's kind of the general framework in terms of the progression. And then on the upper body days, we're gonna do the same thing, but with dumbbell bench press. We're gonna follow a specific progression. It'll be 3 sets each time, which is basically what you guys have always done, but it's just gonna be a little bit more of a specific focus on how we're progressing on it throughout the course of the 10 weeks. That's that. On cardio day, we'll make sure that there are specific stations and things focused on helping you improve your quarter mile run and conditioning test. The Friday, we'll have basically the same flex day workout options with arms and abs, legs, cardio and abs is what we'll call that one. So that's that. And then as you're going throughout these 10 weeks, it's, I guess like first and foremost, what days you come on is based on what practically works with your schedule. But knowing what you know from what I said, you can kind of customize what workouts you come during the week based off of what you care most about. If you're like, I really want to improve my conditioning and my heart health, then prioritize coming on Wednesday. If you know that like toning your arms is something you really want to do, then I would make sure that you also come on Friday, because that is a much more specific, focused arm workout.